Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles to the Angelo Robles podcast. I'm also the founder and CEO at Family Office Association. Today, we're going to cover the extraordinary expansion of entrepreneurship and really specifically in Florida. I've been to Florida multiple times from the New York area over the last couple of months, from the winter into the spring. And wow, especially South Florida, there's just so much going on. So we were fortunate to have our special guest today at one of my live events that I host. And it was really intriguing content. I wanted to invite him to my much larger audience from more of a global perspective and share a little bit of entrepreneurship and investing in earlier stage companies, and somewhat specific to Florida, but some of the principles and things we'll talk about could really be applicable anywhere. Our special guest is Tom Wallace, managing partner of Florida Funders. Tom, welcome to the show and great to see you again.
Angela, great to see you. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here and to be talking to you this morning and to your listeners.
Well, thank you. Why don't we begin with, I think you have an intriguing background. Share with our audience a little bit about your background and what led you to Florida Funders.
Sure. So I pretty much have been an entrepreneur most of my career. I started my first company when I was 23 with my best friend, and we're still best friends this day and still doing companies this day. We've had about pretty much a company a decade and had an exit. And they've always been in technology, in the beginning in infrastructure, later on in SaaS software. I think what makes my background maybe a little bit unique is that along the way I started angel investing pretty early. So I've been angel investing for like 30 years, and I learned the hard way. There's a science to angel investing. There's an art to it too, but there's a science to it. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And when I got involved in Florida Funders, and I'm the managing partner here about 5 years ago, brought that experience. And my partners have similar backgrounds, a lot of entrepreneurship and a lot of entrepreneurs here. And that's something that we always say we're trying to fund and build the next generation of great technology companies. And I always like to say I get to go to work every day and work with these bright, young, talented people that are trying to change the world. What could be more fun than that?
That sounds exciting. I agree with that. So let's talk a little bit. Pre-COVID, I mentioned Florida. People think of great weather, the beaches, a place to retire. I mean, Miami has vibrancy and nightlife, but I think the perception, although they would be wrong, we'll talk about some of the companies that have exploded over the last couple of years in a second, but they probably didn't think of a vibrant entrepreneurial community, a vibrant angel and VC community. And then COVID comes, and for a variety of reasons, business regulation being more open, the weather, I don't know what it was, but it really has exploded, especially since the beginning of this year. And a lot of it is people from New York, Boston, the East Coast, but even out west from California, the Midwest and Chicago, coming to South Florida, partially due to weather, to taxes. And there's been a vibrancy of the investing community. The only place I could think of during COVID, more specifically South Florida, where the real estate prices and rents have skyrocketed.
Yep.
Where homes could be listed for a day and get an offer 20% above asking price. It's been amazing, and it might be an interesting opportunity for you. Describe to our audience the dynamic during COVID and now coming out of it, and how it's been incredibly, I think, beneficial to Florida.
There's no question. Florida, in my opinion, is better positioned than any state coming out of COVID. We benefited in many ways from COVID. I think part of that's political, with our governor, who didn't really shut the state down much or for very long. I think part of it's people in other parts of the country, New York and places like that, wanted to get out of there because the COVID was really bad there and not so bad here. And the weather was nice here. We always have that. So what was amazing to me, I've been working with a bunch of my partners, and we've really been working on changing the tech ecosystem in Florida for a couple of decades. And, COVID just catapulted us to the front of that. And, we like to say at Florida Funders, we're on a mission to change Florida from Sunshine State to startup state. We want to change Florida into a state instead to be known for technology and innovation and not tourism and strawberries or oranges, pick your fruit. And, along the way, there's been a lot of progress, but boy, COVID just really, again, took us to a whole nother level. And, people have been leaving California for a while, leaving San Francisco, leaving Silicon Valley because of all their issues and the costs and all that. But historically, they were going to Austin or Boulder or Denver. That's really changed. When you have the likes of Peter Thiel moving to Miami, um, Orlando Bravo of Thoma Bravo, the number one PE firm, arguably one of the top PE firms in the world, and Marcelo from SoftBank, all moving to Miami. I mean, these are three tech heavyweights, and that's just three up to just to mention three. There are a lot of other ones. Keith Raboy, and so they came for COVID. A lot of people came for COVID. A lot of them are staying, Angelo. I'm telling you, I meet with these people every day, and it's really exciting. Now, the other thing that Miami benefited from was Mayor Suarez. I mean, he is a really hip mayor. He's all over Twitter. He's all over recruiting, entrepreneurs and investors from New York, from Boston, from California, and tell them, come here, set up shop here. We're business friendly. We've got, we're very international. We've got a lot of great things going on. So it's very exciting time to be a Floridian. And we've seen it across the state too. I don't want to just say it's only happened in Miami. I mean, it's happened more in Miami than anywhere else, but we've certainly seen it here in Tampa. We've got a couple, tech heavyweights, billionaires that moved here during COVID, and they're staying. So it's really exciting.
That's a great overview. To add a little bit to that or ask a question on that, there's been a perception that these so-called great universities that produce talented entrepreneurs, they're in the greater Boston area, New York, San Francisco. They didn't want the perception of being more stodgy industries in Florida, maybe not the summers, although sometimes I wouldn't know why. And again, there might have been a grain of truth to that in the past, but again, during COVID and now coming out of it, there definitely is a younger community in Florida and people that might have had options to be in New York, to be in San Francisco, to be in Boston, to choosing to be or remain in Florida. And because there is a vibrancy, because of the business regulation, the taxes, the weather, the social interaction, but importantly, the opportunity to build a company, to have the right talent that wants to be there. And in today's world, depending on the industry, you don't need to have, the company headquarters with hundreds and hundreds of employees. We're all getting more used to working remotely. So talk a little bit about the dynamic of younger people and entrepreneurs in Florida and how that whole ecosystem has radically adapted in the last 15 or so months.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Again, what we've seen on the entrepreneur side is, well, if any area is going to become known for technology, it always comes down to two things. It comes down to talent, it comes down to capital. So the flood of capital that's come into, and people like Peter Thiel and Keith Raboy and Orlando Bravo, the flood of, and that's just to mention a few, David Blumberg Capital, the flood of capital that's coming in.
David has spoken at our group before.
Yeah, the flood of capital that's coming in brings with it talent. Talent's mobile, and it was mobile before COVID. And if there's anything we all learned during COVID, is talent is super mobile. A lot of companies were already offshoring, some of their development, and those people weren't here. But with COVID, people realize in Zoom, hey, I can work from anywhere, and where do I want to live? And so, again, we benefited from that. The demographic in Florida is just changed so much. I mean, and again, not just Miami. Miami's super young, super hip, super chill. The Windward Walls area, Brick Hole, those areas are just on fire, and you see it everywhere. I mean, kids going by on skateboards, and you go to WeWorks. I mean, I don't know how many WeWorks there are in Miami now. I can't keep track of them. And they're just one of the incubators and accelerators, and it's been a really great. Now on the university side, because I wanted to touch on that. Over the years, I've been asked a lot of times, like, what is the one thing you would change about technology in Florida, that holds us back? And I always said a top engineering school. We'd love to have it, benefit greatly from having an MIT or a CMU or a Stanford or a school like that here. And the state of Florida started addressing that about a decade ago and opened a new campus. I was just a commencement speaker at this school about a month ago. It's Florida Polytech University. It's located in Lakeland. The building is phenomenal. They hired a Spanish architect. It's just a really cool campus. But we're in our fourth graduating class, about 400 kids. But that's Florida's Georgia Tech. That's Florida's Carnegie Mellon that will benefit from. I mean, we do have a good university system. University of Florida puts out some. I mean, you know how smart you have to be to get into that school. If you're a high school kid and you want to go to the University of Florida, you pretty much have to have a 4.0 and board scores of 1,400 plus. I mean, that's a tough school to get in. And then UCF, FAU over on the other coast, and FIU, Florida International University. So our university system is robust, and we're getting better because all the time because of all this technology. So FAU's putting $100 million into an entrepreneurship program. That's Florida Atlantic University, which is in Boca Raton. I mean, we're seeing the universities really get behind this, and it's exciting. And the other thing is we're seeing these code schools pop up everywhere that are teaching kids the latest how to program in iOS and Ruby on Rails and things like that. That a lot of times the universities lag in the technology that they're preparing the kids for, frankly. And so
there's no question about that.
Yeah.
Actually, that probably leads into one of my next questions. I have a strong sub-audience of people in high school and college, sometimes from affluent families, sometimes not, relative to what I do. And I've done a fair amount on college, on entrepreneurship, and I've had great guests on. I've been very fortunate. Now, yes, you're talking about those that go to engineering school, but that whole dynamic of ed tech is changing, how people are learning from YouTube. I guess what I'm getting at, and it's okay to disagree, actually, too many people have agreed with me lately. I am beginning to question the value of college for many if they're walking away at the end of 4 years, let alone additional degrees, with $150,000 to $200,000 of debt, or their parents are. Is it strictly for growing up, getting out of the home and social interaction? But do you really need college for that? And I'm very active in the world of blockchain and digital assets. There's very little being taught in school.
Yeah.
You could learn and be way more adaptive by simply just learning on your own, showing initiative, and on YouTube. So I don't want to bash the colleges here too much, maybe a little bit, but what do you look for in younger entrepreneurs? And again, some of them may not go to college or may drop out. Not that you're encouraging that, but talk a little bit about that dynamic and how education is changing and honestly needs to change faster.
Yeah, I mean, in K to 12, I always say there's two major industries or marketplaces in this country that need disrupted in K to 12 and healthcare, in my opinion, are those in technology. We just invested in a company called Chalk Talk, which is a New York-based company. A Jordanian kid is the founder of the entrepreneur. It's really exciting what they're doing in K to 12. But on the university side, there's this dilemma. What did Bill Gates, Michael Dell, Richard Branson? Well, Richard Branson didn't even graduate from high school. Mark Zuckerberg. I can go down the list. What they have in common, they didn't graduate from college, and Steve Jobs didn't even go. He had like one course. So obviously there's a lot of different paths, and college is not the right path for everybody. I do think it's the right path for a lot of people. I do think that 4 years of social interaction, living with other people, and it teaches you to grow up fairly quickly. So I think there's a whole positive side. I agree with what you're saying that universities need to change, and especially the small private ones that are, like you're suggesting, kids are getting out of school with $150,000, $200,000 in debt, and they can go to a state school and get out with no debt, and really, unless it's Ivy League or very close to that, get the same quality of education.
Absolutely. Once you get past the top 12 or 15, the rest up to number 200 or 300 kind of blend in. It's what you put into it.
Yeah. And to answer your question about what do we look for in founders, because when you're an early stage tech investor, the earlier you invest, so if it's a pre-revenue deal, that's very early seed versus Series A, and that's kind of where we play in. Up to Series A, we consider usually to be like a $10 to $20 million round from an institutional VC. When you play in that marketplace, the earlier, the more you're evaluating and placing your bet on the entrepreneur or the founder than you are even the idea. Because it's very common for these folks to end up pivoting. I mean, you see it all the time. And so what we look for in founders more than anything is we want to see that they're smart, intelligent, hardworking, and all the things you look for in anybody you're going to hire. We're not hiring them; we're just giving them $1 million plus. But we really look for tenacity and perseverance. Building, and Angelo, I'm sure you know this, building companies from scratch is really, really hard work. And they're going to face adversity a lot. They're going to get kicked in the teeth. They're going to get punched in the face. They're going to get knocked down. Well, we want to know, do they have a lot of skin in the game? And do they have the attitude that I'm going to succeed no matter what? I'm going to figure this out, whatever it takes, morally, of course. Whatever it takes, I'm going to be successful. And one way I've heard it, if you ever saw the movie Rudy, we want to back Rudies. We want to back, or like my brother. My brother's he just sold his company to Roper Technologies in Sarasota for $1.6 billion. And I remember, the conversation I had with my brother years ago. He was in the SaaS software space in insurance tech, and he said, "Tom, there's a lot smarter guys out there, guys and gals out there. They know more about the industry. I really don't know insurance that well, but I guarantee you, nobody's going to outwork me. I'm the first guy in the office at 7 o'clock. I'm the last guy to leave at 7 o'clock. I fly 100,000 miles a year. That's the person we want. That's who we want to back." And they're just going to figure it out, and they're not going to quit. They have that tenacity, because again, there's always a lot of adversity. I mean, Uber almost went out of business 3 times. I mean, you can go down the list of companies.
Absolutely.
But if you know anything about Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber, that guy was that guy was tough as nails. I mean, he took on the cab industry, he took on city government. He was just a fighter. I mean, that's the kind of guy you want to back.
So the things that you're talking about, what I'm going to define as the ability to think for yourself, to be independent, to be resilient, all things, again, that you probably, at least from an educational perspective, learn nothing about. But is that born inside people, or is it learned along the way? And does coming from a wealthy background sometimes make it harder to be, although you may have certain advantages, but is it harder to be scrappy and be resilient?
Yeah, good question. So, I like to call this hunger, fire in the belly. I don't think it can be taught. I think you either are hungry and competitive and you have that fire in the belly, or you don't. And that goes to hiring salespeople. We work with a lot of our founders on building sales teams, and we're like, you can train them about your product, you can train them to sell, you can train, but you can't train them to be hungry. They're either hungry or they're not. They typically get that pretty early in life, and they typically get it from their parents or their culture. I use, part of my family is Jewish. I use the Jewish culture as an example because you brought up affluence. Or did some of these people come from affluent families? I think the Jewish culture is wonderful about that, where it teaches kids, even though they're growing up with affluence, but it teaches them, that culture teaches them competitiveness. It teaches them tenacity. It teaches them not to quit. And so I just use that culture. There are other cultures like that too, but it doesn't necessarily mean, and we see some very hungry, driven people coming out of wealthy families. When we're getting to know those founders, we're really digging into their backgrounds and trying to figure out, when did they start working? That's a question we like to ask. When was your first job? And if it was like, well, after I got out of college, I did it. No, your very first job. Well, when was your first job, Angela?
When I was 16, going on 17, in construction over the summer from junior to senior year.
That's what we want to hear. We don't want to hear, my summers in college, I went to Europe and I took a gap year, and we don't want to hear that. We want to hear, and by the way, that's the other thing when we're getting to know these founders, we ask them is, well, what do you do in your free time? And you can guess what we want to hear. Work. We don't want to hear, oh, I'm a big golfer, or I'm a big skier, or, I backpack through, I spend every weekend back, whatever. No, we want to hear, I like to work. I'm very passionate what I do and I love it. And, we're not really looking for balanced entrepreneurs. You can be balanced when you get into your 30s and 40s and 50s. When you're 20 years old and you're building a business, we want you working your ass off.
Yeah, since you bring that up, I think the whole thing about work-life balance, maybe because I'm older and type A, and yes, you're correct. There may be a point when that is valuable. And I'm not saying don't have some meditation, downtime, take time for yourself, but generally speaking, the perception that the younger audience has of I'm going to work like 9 to 4 or 9 to 5 and have perfect balance, that may sound great in theory. You will absolutely not be successful doing that. I don't care how educated you are. I mean, maybe you'll be happy. I don't know, because depending on how you define happiness, but are you going to be a grinder or successful entrepreneur doing that? No. I mean, I remember getting to work early, working late, and then still going out with friends and partying, getting 2 or 3 hours sleep, and still being at work again at 7 o'clock in the morning. Could I do that every day? No, but I could probably do that 3 to 4 days a week, which is what I did back in my heyday, so to
Yeah.
speak.
We call that work
But
hard, play hard, right?
yeah, but that whole point about being focused, not having as much work-life balance as you would perhaps want to have, you do need to make sacrifices, and sometimes some people do appear to be lacking that.
Well,
Uh,
I tell the young people, like, well, you're in your 20s. You know, you're not married, you don't have kids yet. Most of them, like, this is the time to work. This is time to make hay while the sun's shining. Later on in life, you're going to have a lot more financial responsibilities. You're probably going to have kids. You're probably going to be married.
Absolutely.
You're going to need to have more balance. Right now, you don't need balance. Just work your ass off.
No, and we all know the stereotype, and it's true, and it's applied to Zuckerberg going out to Silicon Valley and others, grinding it, working 14, 16 hours a day, eating ramen noodles, cheap pizza, getting by very frugally is actually, it's kind of almost a rite of passage. You don't, and some people seem to want the cushiness of life, so to speak, and not know what it's like to really grind it from the bottom, even if they come from an affluent family. And Zuckerberg, I guess, was okay, upper middle class, but still was willing to put in that grind and, survive on, pizza and ramen noodles and, God forbid, tap water. Oh my God. That's like oh no, I can't do that. It must be bottled properly in the bottle.
Well,
Just if you want to be successful, you got to do this shit.
yeah, here's the thing. As an entrepreneur, I can tell you, again, I started my first company when I was 23. When you're doing that, and we were working 80, 90 hours a week, we were having a blast. We were doing it because we wanted to. We loved it. I mean, it wasn't even work. It was like we would have so much fun and work hard. I mean, sure, there'd be tough days and things would go wrong and all that. But, for the most part, we were, nobody had a gun to our head telling us to do it. We wanted to do it. We were really, I always say I learned very early in life what I love to do and found my passion. And that's finding, it's finding, putting together great teams of people and building great companies. I was fortunate. Some people take a longer time to figure out what their passion is, but that's the other thing we look for in entrepreneurs is, is this their passion? Are they just, or is this something that they just are doing because they saw a problem and maybe they don't even know the industry or whatever? A lot of times, they're solving a big problem. Like Zuckerberg, he couldn't get laid at Harvard, so he started Facebook so he could meet girls.
A very worthwhile reason that motivates a lot of young
He
men.
had a passion. That's passion. By the way, that's just I've heard that, but I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Well, no, that probably is pretty accurate. Hey, we like to be honest on the podcast, so let's just be direct. Tom, talk a little bit about are there specific verticals you're more likely to be an earlier stage investor in? What does a typical company look like? Do you look to get in really early, but not super early, maybe a 1 to 3 million valuation? Walk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's a double answer. So our sweet spot historically has been the companies are past this, they're past the pre-revenues. They've got revenues, they've got some customers, they've got some traction. It may only be $100,000 in ARR, annual recurring revenue, maybe a little less than that, maybe more, maybe up to 500,000 annual recurring revenue. That's typically when we invest. We like the valuations to be sub 5 million. Right now, that's very hard to find because everybody thinks, because of, the stock market and SPACs and, everything that's happened and GameStop and all that, every tech entrepreneur thinks their company's worth 15 to 20, 25 times revenues. So valuation is always a little bit of a challenge. Our average check size is a little over $1 million, moving up. So we're looking to place that bet. We want to talk to those early customers that are using the product and find out what do they like about it. Is this a need? Is this a nice to have and have to have? And that's a big part of our due diligence process. And so, and we're looking to help them scale so that they can get to that Series A I was talking about earlier, where they're raising around of $10 to $20 million, and then they're really scaling the business. So that's typically, as far as the verticals, Angelo, we like, and this is really based on what me and my partners, our backgrounds and what we know. So we always say we like to invest in what we know. We don't know bio life sciences. We don't invest in bio life sciences. We don't know medical tech. We don't invest in that. What we do know is ed tech, insurance tech, digital health. We love SaaS software companies, cybersecurity, fintech. We do a lot of fintech investments. So that's where we, and some of that's being here in Florida, and we don't invest in just Florida companies, but over 50% of our investments are in Florida companies. So some of that's driven by what tech is here. And you mentioned crypto. Miami is quickly becoming kind of the crypto capital of the world. In fact, this weekend is the big crypto show in Miami.
That's right. Yes.
It starts, what's today? Thursday. I think it starts tomorrow. And so we have just dipped our toe into crypto, made our first investment, and we're learning, trying to get up to speed. And I enjoyed your talk very much last time we got together and listening to your talk about crypto. So that's kind of where we focus. And we're really looking to help those companies make it to that Series A and then go on from there. We do follow-on investments, so we usually typically participate in the Series A, although we don't lead it. There'll be some other institutional VC that'll lead that round.
And in terms of sourcing deals and activity in the ecosystem, maybe talk a little bit for those that this may be a little bit newer to about incubators for very, very early stage, the value of that to the ecosystem, and accelerators. Do you guys have an accelerator? Are you active with many in the state and out of the state? How does that interact with how you source deal flow as well?
Yeah, well, Y Combinator changed everything about 10 years ago when they came around, and then there's a lot of follow-ons to Y Combinator 500 Techstars, which is over in Miami. Yeah, we work closely with incubators and accelerators. We are not an incubator and accelerator; we're an investor. And real quickly, just so I touch on that. What makes us a little different? We're not only a venture capital fund; we actually have several funds, but we also have a network of angel investors that invest alongside of our funds. So people that are deal junkies or like to look at deals and want to put different amounts of different deals, pass on some deals, go into other deals. We at FloridaFunders.com, our portal, we have they can do that, and they can invest as little as $5,000 as long as they're an accredited investor. So we actually participate in crowdfunding. We don't like to use that word because it's very misconstrued, but that's a big part of what we do. So deal flow is really important. When you talk about why angel investors or what makes for a successful angel investor, I'll use my brother as an example. He did 3 angel investments. I was talking to him about angel investing years ago. He's now an active investor with us, but he said, "Oh, angel investing doesn't work. I did 3 of those deals and they all went to zero." Well, you can't do 3 deals. You got to, if you do any research in this space, you need to build a portfolio of at least 10, if not 15 companies that you're investing in. Because don't forget, a lot of these companies are going to fail. They're going to go to zero. But the ones that make it are going to make it big. They're going to be a 50, 100x, maybe 1,000x. I mean, that's the opportunity. So we're playing a game where if you're not diversifying, first of all, if you're not doing the other thing, the fact that deal flow, I said to Tim, that's my brother, I said, of the 3 deals you looked at, how many deals did you look at to invest in the 3 you looked at? His answer was 3. I'm like, well, that's not a good answer.
Yeah, that's a really bad answer.
Yeah. So we look at 50 deals to invest in 1, roughly. So we're very selective, and by looking at so many deals, you get good at knowing what's a good founder look like, what's a good idea, what's a good market, what makes this company different. So deal flow is very important. So across the state of Florida, there's 45 incubators and accelerators. Every university has one. Like I mentioned, 500 Techstars. There's Wave here in Tampa, where I'm at. There's just a plethora of them. And we work and we look at our jobs to cherry pick the very best companies coming out of those incubators and accelerators. And those are the ones we want to invest in. And the other thing we find is even though they've been through this accelerator program, typically they still need our help. We don't just write checks. once we invest in a company, then we take a board, especially if we're leading the round, we take a board seat, we get involved, we assign what we call an operating partner, and that's one of our investors or one of us that will work very closely with the CEO, coach and mentor the CEO, work closely with the board. They'll be the tip of the spear of our relationship with that company, make introductions to early stage tech companies, make introductions for help them with recruiting. Typically these teams are not fully baked by when we invest. They need a CTO, or they need a chief revenue officer, or they need somebody in marketing or whatever. So we get involved in all that and really try to, again, a bunch of these companies are going to zero. We want to help them be successful. We want as few going to zero as possible. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I guess you mentioned Peter Thiel and power law theory, and how, the right one or two companies, if you have the diversity making good decisions, really drive a lot of the returns. And I know there's been a trend, and I get it, towards being overly diversified as an investor waters down returns. And broadly speaking, that is true. You want to, be strategic, quote unquote, the so-called winners, and be more concentrated relative to your investment thesis. But in the world of earlier stage investing, and even in crypto, just don't know who the winners are going to be. And although it goes a little bit against some grain of being, quote unquote, overly diversified, you just have to be, until you have more data to make more strategic allocation and decisions. I know that probably a third of my cryptos are going to go to garbage. Another third may be very mediocre, if not even lose some money over a 7 or 10 year window. I just don't know what 2 or 3 are going to be the massive 100 to 500x returns. I just don't know.
Yeah.
So that's why I have more diversity than on the surface I would like to have. And I'm assuming from what you're describing, and we know that, but describing to our audience, that is similar in the world of earlier stage investing. If you're a one-off investor into privates, earlier stage, do you really have the stomach to have, I don't know, 60 to 70% of your investments go to zero? I think that bothers a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think what we try to do, again, if you do angel investing right, and there's a lot of research on this, it can outperform every other asset class. But you've got to do it right. You've got to diversify. You've got to have the deal flow. You've got to have really extensive due diligence. Before we invest in a company, we typically do 80 to 90 hours of due diligence. The average angel investor does like next to nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
They never talk to the customers. They never talk to they never talk to the founder's previous employer or who they worked with, and really dig into their background. So what we like to say is we take the heavy lifting out of angel investing for our investors. But what I do, I'm an investor too. I mean, obviously. So I invest in both our funds and in individual deals. And there are just times that I just get a feeling about a founder or, the market, what they're doing, and I'll go, bigger in that deal than other deals. And, it's just, again, some of this is art, some of it's science, but sometimes I just we just have a young man that's doing an exit with us. And I met him when he was still in college. I was on a pitch competition. I was a judge, which I do all the time. We do all the time. And he was in college, and he won the pitch competition. So we gave him 10 grand. And then I didn't hear from the guy for a couple of years. And I heard, then he saw me, Mr. Wallace, I want to talk to you. I'm doing that idea. We invested. And here it is 5-6 years later. And he just, he's going to sell that company, close this week. It's about a 5-6x deal. It's not a huge return. But it's exciting, and he'll go on and do. I mean, he's not even 30, so he'll go on and doing, other deals, and that. But where I was going with this particular founder is a lot of people. He can be very tenacious. He can kind of rub people the wrong way. But I always said to my team, I'm like, this guy's going to be successful. There is no doubt in my mind. I don't know what level of success, but he is going to be successful because he ain't quitting and he ain't going away, and he's going to keep plugging at it. So when you get that feeling about a founder, from an investor standpoint, it makes it easy to invest.
There's the perception in tech-centric companies that there needs to be more than one founder. There needs to be multiple co-founders for a variety of reasons, to some degree, bringing different skills to the table and having tremendous skin in the game. Is that something that you look for?
We prefer having two founders. I mean, the ideal team's Wozniak and Jobs at Apple, right? I mean, so you had Wozniak, who was this brilliant engineer, and you had Jobs, who was this marketing genius and very persuasive guy that could sell ice to Eskimos. That's a great combination. So we do like seeing a two-person team. And usually, like if there's a 3 or 4, not as excited about that. But we do back individual founders too. I mean, business is a team sport. We all know that. So when it's an individual founder, we want to meet the other people on the team, because one of the things that's going to determine the success of a founder is their ability to surround themselves with the best possible team. And if they're able to do that, they're able to convince these people to leave whatever operating. They're really talented people that could be doing anything, and they're going to come work for this startup, and they're able to convince them, and they have really, really solid people around them. That's a very good sign, because they're taking pay cuts. It's a very high risk for that employee that founder recruited. And if they're able to do that, that's a very, very positive sign for us.
For sure.
And we really like founders that are just, let's face it, most founders, most CEOs have pretty strong egos, present company excluded, of course. But we want them to have a strong ego, but it can't be so strong that they can't, they've got to be able to surround themselves with people that are smarter than them and not be intimidated. If they're just looking to surround themselves with people that tell them yes, and you're smart and you're great and you have all the great ideas, that's not a good sign either.
No, it's not. When I think of Florida, relatively recently, a couple of companies come to mind, and I'm not sure if you were personally or through Florida funders. Maybe we'll do a little quick round robin on the 3 of them. I would think of Magic Leap. I would think of Chewy, which has been amazingly successful. I'm not so sure. Has that been the most successful company to ever come out of Florida? And Papa, which is relatively more recent. Opinions on any or all of the 3?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with all 3 companies. Papa, we passed on. We saw it pretty early. I've had the founder on my podcast, Alexis Ohanian, if you know Alexis.
Oh, sure, from Reddit.
He's the founder of Reddit, and he's obviously maybe more known for being married to Serena Williams. But
yes, that too.
But Alexis lives over in the other coast. He lives in like Palm Beach or whatever. And I had those 2 on my podcast, and he invested in Papa. Papa during COVID really was in a great spot. And if you don't know what Papa does, what basically is, it's for elderly people, it's rent a grandchild. So if you want somebody just to keep your 92-year-old father, that's my father's age, spend some time with them during the day, play checkers with them, chess, do stuff, and they do some light stuff like driving around. They just raised another round at a pretty significant valuation. It didn't really fit us. The founder's an impressive young man. I do think he'll be successful. It's still early, but he's making some good progress. Magic Leap, my nephew worked for Magic Leap. So he left San Francisco to move to Fort Lauderdale to work for Magic Leap. I mean, this was our high flyer. We don't talk about Magic Leap in Florida that much because, as you probably know, they raised billions and billions of dollars. Google Ventures, Kleiner, the top name VCs all put millions of dollars. It's an augmented virtual reality company. They came out with their own headset. I think it was about a year ago, they laid off half the people in the company. They had probably 1,200 employees. They laid off like half of them, one of which was my nephew. And they've kind of pivoted more to B2B. Technology is kind of funny. Yeah, and Jobs talked a lot about this. You got to have the right timing. You can be too early and you can be too late. You got to get, and I think with Magic Leap, they were too early with their technology. Hopefully they pivoted. Hopefully they'll be successful. Ronnie Abowitz, the founder of that company, is a very sharp guy and very well respected. And then Chewy, Ryan Cohen's company, Ryan spoke at Emerge a couple of Emerges ago. That's our big tech show in Miami. Told his story, incredible story. He started that company when he was 26, sold it 5 years later for $3 billion to PetSmart. Really great story. He talked about how he went out to Sand Hill Road, out to all these venture capital, and they all said, hey, this will never work. You're too young to remember this, but Pets.com, this is Pets.com 15 years later. And, there's this little company called Amazon that's going to crush you. You just don't have a chance. And Ryan just ignored them and built this great company in the pet space. And I use Chewy.com. I have a dog. I use Chewy.com all the time. It's a great company. And you probably know he's also the guy behind the whole GameStop thing. Now that he's
Oh, yes.
an investor. So is Chewy our most successful unicorn? We're probably up to about a dozen unicorns in the state of Florida. Fanatics, Jet Smarter, locally here, ReliaQuest, cybersecurity. This area is kind of known for cybersecurity in Tampa. We've got ReliaQuest, No-B4 is a unicorn, and ConnectWise is another unicorn. So I would say with Chewy, it's a success story that was the most visible, and Ryan and his partner did this in a very short period of time. It's unusual to have an exit in 5 years and
Yes.
at that magnitude. I mean, usually it's, the average company is not going to exit or go public for somewhere closer to 10 years. So, that was pretty exciting.
I mean, talk a little bit. We hinted at it earlier, and I guess even in some of the companies that we just mentioned, taking an analog type industry and making it digital. That appears to be, it's so obvious. Trends aren't going backwards, they're going forward. So digitalizing somewhat antiquated, very centralized, kind of outdated. We mentioned education, so ed tech, insurance tech, those are all often regulatory unions in some of them, just complex industries that have been resistant to change because they don't want to change the status quo. But this is inevitable. So talk a little bit about that and the type of entrepreneur, which sounds like the ones you're mentioning on Chewy that just don't listen to the naysayers and just move forward.
Yeah, you have to have thick skin to be an entrepreneur. Well, it's kind of funny, if you live inside the tech world, which is where I do, technology moves kind of slow. If you live outside it, it moves pretty fast.
It's true.
I remember going to Blockbuster, renting these videotapes and thinking, streaming technology is available. Why is it taking so long to become mainstream? Look at your average doctor's office. You go in, they got those manila folders with those colors on them. They give you
so true.
They give you that stupid clipboard. Like, are you kidding me? What year is this?
Yeah, it hasn't changed in 50 years.
And Jack Dorsey talked about this when he launched Square. I mean, he's like, we're going to be paying with everything with our cell phone. I do pay for most of my stuff with my cell phone, but that technology's been around. So what happens in technology, the technology is only a piece of it. Then you've got in the existing business, who are the constituents that own that market and how receptive are they to change? So when you got doctors and hospitals that are very reluctant to change, and HIPAA compliance and government, and you got all these players, the insurance providers, the doctors, the hospitals. And the more complex that supply chain is, the harder it is. And again, Dorsey talked about this, when you came out with Square. I mean, just think about that. When you look at paying with everything with your cell phone, you've got Apple and Google, on the software side, you've got MasterCard, Visa, American Express, you've got all the cellular services, the AT&T, Verizon's. You got all these people with their hands in that pie, and they don't want to give it up. So, that's why some industries are very slow to disrupt. I mean, we even saw that with Uber. I mean, Uber obviously disrupted the transportation industry and specifically the cab business. They had to fight a lot of people to do that. Same thing with Airbnb. I mean, Airbnb is still fighting that battle, where they're disrupting the hotel industry, and, they're still getting where, certain neighborhoods are saying you can't rent your house on Airbnb, you can't rent apartments on Airbnb. So, there's always two sides of this technology. Getting the technology there is one thing. Getting people and the players in the space to accept it's a whole nother battle, typically. I mean, look at K-12 education is a great example of that too. Look at the teachers union. The teachers union is stifling education,
for sure.
In my opinion, not
mine too.
Not accepting it, not saying, hey, this is how we're really going to change the learning experience for children. And that's this company, Chalk Talk, I talked about earlier that we invested in. We're very excited about because they're using a hybrid of online, offline technologies, preparing the teacher to be a better teacher. And they're getting test scores of students that are 6x what people that aren't using Chalk Talk are getting.
Wow.
So,
actually, if you don't mind, we probably got 10 minutes left. I have 2 or 3 more questions. I was going to ask to give us a bit of an inside view of a company you're currently invested in. Since I'm intrigued by industries that are antiquated, that could change, obviously EdTech Give us a little more context on Chalk Talk. Tell us about the entrepreneurs, what their thesis is, and how successful they've been so far.
Sure. The founder of Chalk Talk, he goes by Mo. I don't have his last name handy, but he grew up in Jordan, and he came to the United States to go to high school on a scholarship to a private high school. Then he got a free ride to Brown. Then he worked as an investment banker in kind of Wall Street for like 6-7 years, if I remember correctly. But he always loved education. And he just always believed that education, and I agree with this, is how we lift everybody up. It's how you get people out of poverty. It's how you move up all of society. And his passion for education, he started to look at, ed tech and how teachers teach kids. And he focused on high school, and that's where his product is focused. And his product is a part content and part software. It's a SaaS model. He's got Miami-Dade County using it. He's got some really nice traction with some big school districts. And it's really focused on increasing test scores. And if you look at education, the one thing that's really become in vogue is measuring how good these schools are. In the state of Florida, for example, every school gets an A, B, C, D, or E, F, whatever, every year. And that determines their funding. So these principals, these teachers, they're all driven to get, have their students have the very best test scores. And that's what he's having a lot of success with. And that's why he's getting a lot of traction, with the decision makers in these townships and school districts. I mentioned another company we've, a bunch of really exciting companies we're investing in or just recently invested in. HealthSnap is another one. This is remote patient monitoring. So if you think about it, again, healthcare is a space we love that absolutely needs to be disrupted. It's 20% of our GDP, 25%. So this is technology out of the University of Miami. Both of the founders came out of the University of Miami, and it's basically for diabetics, COPD, some acute illness patients, and it's a monitoring system so that the doctor, they can ship HealthSnap ships them the equipment that measures their heart, their blood pressure, or whatever, their insulin level, and then the doctor gets that like really almost on a daily basis, so they can monitor that patient. It really changes the readmission rate, which is huge in healthcare. If you send somebody home from the hospital and they end up back in that hospital a week later, you as a hospital get dinged, and that's how that model is, and they're having great success with that. So that's another company we're really excited about. And now another one, Simple Bet. I'll share this one with you. This is micro betting, and this founding team, this is a New York company also, and it allows you as say you're a baseball fan, somebody comes up to the plate, you don't need to be in the stadium, you could be at home, and you can bet on, is this guy going to strike out, hit a home run, double, triple? The first pitch is a strike, second pitch is a strike. It changes the odds instantaneously based on that. It's really cool. Wow. And they have deals with Major League Baseball, the NBA, and FanDuel and DraftKings. So if you think about how people watch sports, the engagement level they get with people that are doing this micro. Now you can't bet $1 million. It's guy's going to strike out. It's like $10 or whatever. It's micro betting, but the average person that's been using their product is like places like 30, 40 bets a game. So there's so much more involved in the game and not just participating, they're actively involved in the game. So it's really exciting. And we're very excited about that company.
And you mentioned just starting to get your feet more wet, which at least you're doing it, and how things are changing in the world of blockchain and smart contracts and what I spoke about with Ether and Polkadot and Solana and all these amazing platforms growing that are decentralized. So looking at things like DeFi, looking at antiquated industries like banking and finance, insurance as well, the intermediary, the broker. I mean, this industry is changing. They're powerful industries. They have lobbies. They employ a lot of people. And I know this is not going to happen like that, but I don't think it's going to take 20 years, probably 7 or 10. I think the big banks will be creative. They already have big digital asset divisions. They keep it a little bit more quiet. They're growing. But I think the smaller banks might be in trouble once we have central bank digital currencies, programmable money, less of a need for savings and checking, intermediaries through loans taken out to some degree via DeFi. How have you looked into areas pertaining to that, to fintech in general, and the changing dynamic of the world of intermediaries and finance, partially due to what I call the digital asset ecosystem?
Yeah, so we have loved fintech, and some of my partners have a background in fintech. So we've made many investments in the fintech space. But this we mostly do B2B too. I forgot to mention that we don't do a lot of B2C. A couple of us have a little bit of a background in B2C. So on the B2B side, for example, on payables, we invest in a company called Finexio in Maitland, Florida, that automates the payables process. And their pitch when they pitched this, I had no idea that 70% of all companies in America still pay 70% of their payments are done with a check. Actually, send a check.
Wow.
Can you believe that? I mean, we Venmo back and forth on the B2C side all day long, but on the business side, they're actually sending paper checks. So Finexio is automating that process and make it and digitizing it. So we're very excited about that company. Again, on the crypto side, we're just made our first investment, and we made it. Frankly, we invested in a young man that I'm going to have on my podcast here coming up, who's out of MIT, that just blew us away with his knowledge of DeFi. And he's
Yeah.
all over this space. He worked at Goldman Sachs on Wall Street. I think he has a PhD or master's from MIT. He started studying crypto there. He's just a very impressive young man, and he's all over this DeFi space. He loves Polkadot, and he is going to be investing in different projects. You know, they don't call them companies; they call them projects, as you know. And so we are hitching our wagon to him and trying to learn as much as we can from
He
him.
sounds great. If you and Stephanie could remember, Tom, if you could make an email intro, I'd love to have him on as well.
Yeah, sure. His name's Rennick. I don't know his last name off the top of my head, but yeah, we'll be happy to make that introduction.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it sounds great, especially that background, which I could relate to. How active has your firm been, and could the industry do a better job? The answer is yes, in female entrepreneurs.
Yeah, we love female entrepreneurs. We love minority entrepreneurs, and we get dinged a lot, the industry, for this. I think it's, I know the numbers. So 1% of all the companies funded last year were by African-American founders. And, the African-Americans make up about 12% of the US population. These are rough numbers. So obviously they're way underrepresented. And the same thing's true on the female side. I don't know those numbers up at the top of my head. I mean, the numbers are bigger, but obviously more females. We can't invent entrepreneurs. We're not in that business of inventing entrepreneurs. This, to me, is a, cultural change that starts in the high schools and the colleges and families. The quintessential example of this is Israel. You know anything about Israel? I've been there. I went there 2 years ago for a tech conference. I mean, it's just, they breed entrepreneurship there.
Yes, they do.
If you're a kid growing up in Israel, you're not dreaming someday to play in the NBA or be the next rapper or whatever. You're thinking about, hey, the guy in the next town over founded Waze and sold it to Google, and that's what I want to do. So it's a cultural thing where it's really cool to be an entrepreneur and a founder, and and that is already true in America as a whole, but I don't think it's necessarily true in certain segments of America, like the African American population. That is, Jay-Z, by the way, is a very successful investor. He just did Oatly that went public. He was an early investor in that, and he
Right.
did. I think he had a killer year last year. It was on one of my. I was reading about that. So I think you'll start. We're starting to see that, and we just, we want to see more of it. But again, we don't invent entrepreneurs. I mean, they got to, they got to want to do it, and they've got to have that drive and that desire. But we love investing in them and love to do more. And women are the same way. We have a bunch of women founders in our portfolio companies that love women founders. And Melissa Bridgeford, who is a founder of a company called Stylist, which was one of our investment. This is a really cool company. You can take your phone and take a picture of anything. Like, I like that shoe you have on. I take a picture of it. I text it to Stylist. It's text commerce, or sometimes called conversational commerce. It's easier than buying off Amazon. If I wanted to, if I took this, like this, what is it with these Yetis? If I took a picture of it, send it to Stylist, they'll text me back right away. Here's the price. Do you want it? Yes or no? But Melissa is, she went to the University of Florida, then to Harvard. Very smart entrepreneur. It was easy to back her because of her passion and what she's doing, and we love this space, as well as her background.
And I think my final question, what is your variant perception, defined as an investor that holds a strong viewpoint that is substantially different from what the market viewpoint holds?
If I understand the question, I was listening to a podcast recently that touched on this, and it's, there's a lot of capital out there right now, and there's a lot of people, a lot of funds, and there's a lot of private equity, as you know, and it's chasing the same. They tend to chase the same deals. I think on our end, what we try to look at is we don't want to be in a bidding war with other venture capital firms. We're looking for those really unique, different ideas that maybe a lot of other people don't see, or they pass on, and those, the crazy ideas. I mean, the crazy ideas are the ones, I got to tell you, the first time I heard about Uber, I thought it was the stupidest idea I ever heard. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say this, but when somebody said, wait, some stranger is going to come in their car, which I don't even know what kind of car it is, pick me up at my house and take me to the airport or a restaurant. Why would I do that? Help me with that. I didn't get it, but I didn't really see the GPS and the smartphone and the whole integration and how cheap it was going to be, how convenient it was going to be. So again, I'm not sure I completely understood if I answered your question, but we're not just looking to do the deal that everybody else wants to do. We want to look at, something that you kind of like, that's a crazy idea. Is it crazy enough to work? Those are the disruption ideas. I mean, remember the first time you heard about Airbnb? Like, I'm going to go I'm going to rent somebody's couch.
You're right.
Bedroom, and I'm going to stay with strangers. That's the stupidest idea I ever heard. But then they pivoted some too, where it was you can rent the whole house, or you can rent somebody's apartment, and they're not there, but they clean it and they take care of it. And, so disruption sometimes hard to see until it smacks you in the face.
No doubt about it. And then, of course, we second guess ourselves on some of those. Like, damn, should have got in there. Tom, for those that would like to learn more about Florida Funders, possibly look at it from a investing perspective, where could they go online? Who could they reach out to? Perhaps even an email.
Sure. So floridafunders.com is our portal, and that's where we put up all the companies that we have up for investment, as well as we have a whole side of that. If you're a founder and you're looking for funding, you can go on there, do a 10-minute application process, and it gets you started in our process of us evaluating you if it's a good fit for us to invest in you. My email address is tom@floridafunders, that's with an S, funders.com. Feel free to email any listeners if you have any questions, or I can help you in any way. Would love to have you join us on our mission to change Florida from Sunshine State to Startup State.
Or how about both sunshine and startup?
Yeah.
I do want that sunshine and lower taxes too. Well, Tom, it's been tremendous to see you again, this time digitally, to have you on. Look forward to following the amazing success of you and your organization, having you on again in the future. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast, founder and CEO at Family Office Association. Go on Instagram, where I'm very active, and simply follow us. I'll probably follow you back. It simply is our company name, Family Office Association. And surprisingly, for the world of finance and family offices, I'm actually rather active on a unique platform like Instagram. In terms of our interviews and our YouTube platform for what I call a podcast, we're Family Office on YouTube. Go and subscribe. And I do have a classic Apple and Spotify podcast as well. You can find it, the Angelo Robles podcast, and we're FamilyOfficeAssociation.com for those interested in more traditional membership or interactivity. And we're back very frequently now in New York this summer, effectively our backyard, to hosting physical events. So it's really, I hope, much value and benefits both physically and digitally, as well as our content and access and consulting that we offer. But on that note, you could find us. Thank you so much. And Tom, again, great to see you again, and look forward to having you on again in the near future.
Angelo, great to be with you. Thanks for having me, and all the best to you and your listeners.
Thank you. Bye-bye.